So, Anika, you mentioned a while ago to me that you thought that people should be building in bigger profit margins than they thought they should. So, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I think when I first started, I really only thought about, oh, this is the materials that I've paid for. And so you sort of add that up and then you add like a little bit extra and you think, oh, well, that's how much something should be. And that's sort of okay for a little while, but then once you keep going, you need to start thinking about things like paying rent and paying staff, paying yourself even. That's nice. And I think a lot of people just don't sort of keep that in mind, or they think, oh, well, these are my prices, and if I put them up, then no one's going to buy anything anymore. But what that sort of does is that it creates this industry where everything is way too low priced. And that's okay for some people if they're doing it part-time and they don't really mind if they're making much of a profit, or but it's just sort of better for everyone if we're being paid properly for the amount of work that we're putting in. And especially with handmade items, you don't often get paid for the time that you put in, and that's really important because you're an expert at what you do because you spend so long doing it. And so I think, yeah, it's a really tricky thing, and I especially understand, like every time I have a new product, I think, oh, I don't know if anyone's going to buy this. And so the instinct to price it low is definitely strong even now. And it's also something that no one talks about. So you can't really say to other people who have similar businesses, what is your pricing like? You can look at what their end pricing is, but you don't know how long it takes them to make it. So yeah, it's sort of a taboo topic, but I think one that people need to think about a bit more.
And so, how do you figure out how to price products?
I have a giant spreadsheet. So I do put in all of the materials and I do an estimation of how long it's going to take me. So some of my products I don't do much physical work on, and some of them, like this, I do some finishing by hand, mainly because I really like doing this and I want to have that physical contact with the products. So I do sort of figure out how long it takes me to make something, and then I pay myself an hourly wage within that cost sort of line on the spreadsheet. And then I kind of have some like multipliers. So it's got to be at least double what the materials and the time cost me. And usually it's got to be a fair bit more than double because I've got rent and I have to feed myself and all of those sorts of things. So it always ends up being a lot more than you think, but that's what it has to be to cover all the costs and for you to pay yourself a barely living wage.
And have you found that in general people accept your pricing? Is it something that people ever query?
Yes, it is. I find that the people who, my customers, they get it and they're happy to pay the price and they understand why the price is what it is. But yeah, sometimes I get new customers or people who I guess aren't really my customer who would normally buy from larger shops, more commercial sort of operations, and they're like, why does it cost this much? You know, I could buy something at Kmart for, you know, for $10 or something. And it's like, well, I can't price something at $10. I'm not Kmart, I'm making this all here.
And there's a whole conversation there about the ethics of fashion too.
Yeah, and so usually what happens is I start talking a bit about that and they just don't want to know about it. Like I think they're actually not really interested. They couldn't really understand for a second why it was so much, and then they don't really want to know the reasons. They just don't want to buy it, and so they leave. And that's fine. They're just not my customer.
Yeah.
Yeah.